The kingdom has fallen. But when its exodus to Hilltop is threatened by a sudden and powerful snowstorm, they are left with little choice but to cross Whisperer territory and risk war. Which should turn out okay, as long as they don't leave a giant trail of evidence behind them, right? Also, Negan goes and saves Judith in a predictable but nicely handled little sequence. It's the season finale that feels more like a season premiere on The Walking Dead. Season 9, Episode 16. The Storm. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to our final review of this season for The Walking Dead. And yes, spoilers are coming ahead. And also, just a reminder, our new table of contents index system. If you want to jump to any point of this review, just go ahead and look in this description below. There'll be a little table of contents there, little descriptors. You can jump around, jump to any section of this review at any point. Watch it in any order you like. Anyway, so let's get to the episode itself. And like I had said at the beginning, it really felt more like a season premiere. It felt like a new establishment of story as opposed to really wrapping up the old one. Last week's episode with the heads on the pikes and everybody's reaction and so on felt much more like the proper kind of season ender. So, just kind of a weird transition point. It also gives us, what, our third time jump of the season. I mean, the season opened up with an 18-month time jump from the end of last season. Then, of course, we had the 6-year time jump halfway through after Rick's disappearance. And here sounds like a month or so since the whole Pike sequence, if I heard things right. Certainly we got a little bit of snow starting to fall at the end of last episode. But there's a lot of stuff that has happened to sort of push Kingdom over the edge. So just, you know, again, just that extra time jump here, it makes everything feel disjointed. And because of the ending last episode being very powerful, very much of a strong statement, territorial markings, you know, literal line drawn in the sand. Well, I guess not literally drawn in the sand because there's no sand. It's done with pikes. But you know what I mean. Definitely battle lines were drawn there, territorial lines. So this episode, with the time jump, with the change that has happened with Kingdom, the fact that it does seem to be setting up the justifications for the war, or maybe only apparent justifications, it did really felt like the beginning of a story. So it really feels like this should have been the season premiere for 10, and they should have cut it off just last week. But yeah, big things have happened. The kingdom has fallen. The pipe system that, if we remember, the reason it was failing, and that was the reason Henry was originally going to Hilltop to learn blacksmithing so he could be better at repairing the pipes. Now the cost of that has come due, and that is the system has failed, which means I guess there's no more water. I guess this was the water pump system. I wasn't sure if it was a heating system or hot water, but it seems to be the pump system, because then the fires came and then the rot, and that seems to have been what has gutted Hilltop. I actually had to rewind the beginning and re-watch it because I missed that final sequence of seeing all the roofs on fire. And the street level stuff looked pretty clean, a little damage on like the lunch overhang or something, whatever, the outside the picnic area. But I actually had to go back because I wasn't sure exactly what had happened, and I think the problem with that is so much trying to tie in not only the description of the fall of the kingdom, describing how the kingdom's fallen apart, but also as an allegory to what is happening between Ezekiel and Carol, how their relationship is also falling apart. Another strong background theme throughout this episode. How, let's face it, marriages rarely survive the loss of a child. That's just a statistical fact. Very often drives just a permanent wedge. You can't look at each other without being reminded of what you have lost. And in fact, what is the line that Carol says to Daryl is, he resents you because he can't resent me. He blames you because he can't blame me. And again, just another further side. And of course, the close relationship between Carol and Daryl, I'm sure Ezekiel seeing is also threatened. Probably the reason why he made that request of him. Not only is Daryl's presence sort of another reminder of the loss of Henry, Lydia especially, and Daryl is kind of her protector at the moment. But I also think there might be a little jealousy issues that were going on there too. So, yeah. But basically, yeah, the kingdom's fallen apart, and I had to kind of go back because winter doesn't seem like the time to do an exodus to change places. And if you could just hunker down, I was like, can't you get firewood if your heating system is gone? But yeah, I guess if fires have ravaged all of the kingdom, or what it looks like most of it, you don't have a real roof over your head. You can't really stay there. And when they leave, the weather does look nice. I mean, it's cold, but it's clear. So if you're going to go, that sort of makes sense as the way, as the way to do it. But of course, you know, storm coming up, that's definitely going to complicate things, force us to make some really harsh choices, which ends up with our you know, kind of big climactic move of the episode. One thing I did have a question is, I guess sometimes I get a little curious because I don't have a map. I'm sorry, I haven't gone and gotten the official Walking Dead map that shows where the layouts of everyone is, if even such a thing exists. With where Hilltop and Kingdom is, and the bridge, which could have been much faster. Rick's bridge made the trip a lot faster if that was still there. Which again, tying back into the beginning of the season, they needed the bridge to link the communities, and of course the sacrifice of Rick, which has been brought up several times throughout the season. I also love the little reference to Maggie, the quick one at the beginning. We haven't heard from Maggie? No, we sent a letter out. Post? You have travelers that go and deliver these things? I don't know how that works. Anyway, so... But I was just kind of curious as when they get hit by the storm that the sanctuary was the closest place for them to get shelter. Always seemed like that was a serious distance from everything else. But then, I guess with bridges down and roads and direction changes, it's... Anyway, it was a good setup. Again, the threat of not having firewood, of being trapped, that you can't stay, that makes sense. You have a rough call to make. You got to cross Whisperer territory in order to survive. Just, I don't know, couldn't you have stayed a little bit longer? Couldn't you have gone out, chopped some wood? Should have axes, right, in your group if you're exiting. I know maybe there's actually not a whole lot around the sanctuary because that's more of looks like more of a city industrial area where that was built. So probably less trees, less access to that. Can't get any wood. Did they at least send the horses with a small group and not leave them in the sanctuary to die? Did they send those off? Because you could take those riders around quick. Maybe hunker down, send riders out, get help, come back. That have been an option. It's not as dramatic, but just I'm worried about all their supplies. Okay, so they've got to make a run from the sanctuary through Whisperer territory, risking war in order to get to Hilltop and survive and not freeze. Okay, standard setup. You gotta take a risky chance in order to live. And interestingly enough, I guess the straight line between Hilltop and Sanctuary involves right past those pikes. Very coincidental. Honestly, that was a really nice shot. Again, I'm making fun of it because it is kind of coincidental, but from just a pure visual standpoint, I think they did that shot really well, of just walking up and through the cold and through the bit of storm and just seeing the pikes, the sticks still standing there that they've got to sort of walk through and go through the territories, crossing that line. Again, a great visual representation. So yeah, I make a little bit of fun here. But it really was, I think, a beautiful whole shot sequence right there. Was handled really nicely. And like I said, I get the need to kind of take this risk and cross the territory. Again, I don't know what the map is, but I'm going to guess this was the shortest line. This is the best chance that they had. My issue with this entire sequence, and it's why I did not find it as powerful as it really intended to be, is because they play a little bit with Walker physiology that I don't like. The opening sequences when they first run into walkers and the snow is starting to come down, it does look like they're moving a little bit slower. The fact is, the walkers should freeze in frozen weather. They have no internal body temperature. They're dead. They're not generating any heat. They should freeze. This should be actually the best time to travel, is in winter. Yes, you could freeze, but the walkers are frozen. And in the initial stages, it looks like it's just starting to freeze. The temperatures are just dropping. They're just slowing down. So our first exposure to that was kind of able to buy it. The scene with Lydia and the walker, you know, in the pond, you know, again, that water's frozen. It's frozen into it and it can't, you know, get and move. That, again, it looks like we're doing a transition there. When they get into the full territory and they encounter those three guardians and Daryl shoots and like shatters and you see that it's down and these are walkers and they're kind of making noises but they're frozen straight. I was like, yes! You have done this right. I was concerned in the beginning, but I was like, oh my God, you have frozen water and walkers that are moving around? That shouldn't be. But if the transition's just happening, it's just getting cold enough, things are just freezing, if they're slowing down, I'll buy that. When we're in the middle of this heavy storm, when they're talking about the river being frozen, safe enough to cross, when they encounter a walker, yes, it should be frozen, and I thought that was handled great. The issue I had is, if it's frozen and you can tell it's frozen, why, Michonne, would you chop off the heads? Daryl has shot the one. If these are guardians and if whispers come by, this is the easiest evidence that people have come by. Maybe with the one that Daryl shot, you could pull out the arrow, take a branch from a nearby tree like it fell off in the snowstorm, landed by there, it got crushed there, do some damage, cover up the arrow hole, leave the other ones frozen, nothing to bother you, move on. You don't want to leave evidence you're crossing enemy territory. And I know it's natural reaction, and it makes sense. Do you see walkers? You slice, and they're done. Safety first. This isn't those circumstances. They're in dangerous places. So that kind of bothered me. But they did establish that walkers are frozen. Great. So when they cross the stream, and we have the walkers starting to pull themselves out of the snow, it had lost me at that point. However good the sequence is, and yes, you get to do the Die Hard moment, and Daryl can reach up and grab the icicle and stab the walker to the face. Okay, fine. But none of them should move, and they shouldn't be moving that fast. They shouldn't have been a threat. They shouldn't be pulling themselves out. And don't talk to me again about the insulation aspect of snow, igloos and stuff, how snow kind of insulates you. Again, if you're generating body heat. These guys don't. They're walkers. They're dead. Lizards aren't warm-blooded anyway, so even if you're saying there's something moving through the body, it's certainly not warm-blooded. They're certainly not generating body heat. So that really bothered me. That really completely pulled me out of what was really otherwise, I think, mostly a good episode. Again, it's like you had to put action in here because it's Walking Dead, but it didn't need it, and you shouldn't have had that. Should have been a season premiere. Establish the storylines, the feelings, the cascading relationships, everyone falling out, Lydia just being hated on by everybody. You know, do that. That makes sense. I can understand Alden hating Lydia. I can understand Carol not liking Lydia. I can understand all of these issues. Makes total sense. Walkers being frozen, but then not being frozen. It's plot-driven circumstance, and I wish they hadn't done that. It was really, I think, really undercut a lot of stuff that was actually really good happening in this episode. So Lydia, yeah, living in a world surrounded by hate. The death of Henry, feeling not only responsible for that, but then the death of everyone else. It's a hard circumstance. And look, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Lydia, of the character. But I think there was a lot of great stuff that was happening here, and I especially like the sort of burgeoning protective relationship that Daryl is developing with Lydia. How again, just how protective, how much he's watching out. The whole sequence where she is talking that maybe it's better if she goes, and she just doesn't want to be hate, doesn't want to be called all these problems, and Daryl's like, hey, it's their problem, not your problem. You can't let them drag you down. It's just very supportive, and considering, of course, that originally Daryl was living well, no, but he didn't, because he was protective of Lydia, then ready to let her go, and then became protective, a little back and forth. But he can identify with, you know, mutual experience and bad family relationships. So I like that kind of dynamic going on. But of course, the pressure of all of these circumstances weighs on her pretty heavily, makes some pretty self-destructive choices through this episode. And the first of those is actually our Scene of the Week for this week. And the reason why is it's a simple, beautiful sequence. When she walks away from the group and is wandering through the woods and finds that walker half frozen in the pond. I had to go back and rewatch it. It was just a beautifully shot scene. This simple piano music that's going on in the background, just singular notes, very reminding of Satie. The camera work was gentle. You know, just soft and quiet in there. They framed some beautiful shots. The back and forth, the comparative between Lydia's kind of fascination with the walker's obsessive, just the fact that it can't move, and so she really would have to like completely give herself if she does want to end this torture she's feeling inside, the sense of responsibility. I thought it was really a beautiful sequence. And then when she's caught at the end and sees Carol standing there and that every level of judgment kind of back and forth, it's like, you know, you think great things about your heroic characters. Was Carol going to let her do that? Would she have stopped? Because the way they had framed that, I was expecting someone to come up and grab her and pull her away at the moment, you know, any moment. But they didn't do that. They let her sort of catch herself and not make that decision on someone else, whether or not to commit to that death, to stop oneself from dying. So I think it really set up the dynamic between their relationship, between Carol and Lydia's relationship, I think, really well. And there's that whole sequence, again, it was quiet, it was simple, it was a little, yeah, there was a little cheese in that for sure, but I think it was done, it was presented beautifully, and it really impressed me. Which of course leads to a lot of our emotional dynamic, and then the following kind of thing when Lydia runs off and Carol has to go and sort of rescue her, and ends up that Lydia's trying to get her to kill me. It has to be you, it has to be you, I'm sorry that it does. And then Carol does make that heroic choice. No, death is never the right direction. Can't be responsible for that. This was a choice other people made. I mean, all those thoughts I'm sure was going through her head right there as she went and took out the walker that was going to kill them. It was great, and I think it was a nice turnaround with their relationship, and maybe can give a little bit of healing, the potential for. I mean, they're both going to feel the loss of Henry forever going forward, but I think it might at least take away some of that animosity that might have been brewing between them. Also, it keeps Carol from losing herself, which she was afraid to do, and go back into Psycho Carol mode, which I still think might be very useful in the war ahead. And yes, of course, we can't forget about Negan and Judith. Well, Negan, happy to be out of the jail. You know, there were fun sequences. I like Negan kind of enjoying the fact that he can hang with other people. Immediately goes to being a douche. Insulting and messing with everybody. That's kind of his default standpoint. I love the speech by Eugene when the chimney sort of caves in. It is, you know, goes off on his whole Eugene speech, which I can't even replicate here. And Negan's just, man, I missed you, Eugene. The feeling is not mutual. I just like the little moments. Maybe a little too much leaning into the Negan personality there, but it was kind of fun. I had to sort of appreciate every Dean Morgan. Also, when they end up having to leave, and he's like, what, not one of you was going to come and uncuff me? Yeah, that's where you are on the pecking order, Negan. You're lucky they didn't put you back down in the basement. But, of course, all of this is building up to Judith running off to go find Dog, who, of course, ran off for some unknown godly reason. Dogs were much smarter than that. I don't think he would have done that. But the impetus for her to run off, and, of course, Negan to be the one to go after her because she's a very special girl, and he would risk anything to save her. She kind of saved him, really, and I think so Negan feels responsible for saving Judith. It was a nice sequence, maybe a little over the top, a little too much of the injury to Negan's leg with the wind. I'm assuming the board had a nail in it or something. But again, a little predictable, knew that it was going to happen, served an appropriate purpose, making Negan a little more trustworthy, which led us to that beautiful, like, little tete-a-tete between him and Michonne at the end there, which I think they're starting to... I'm not going to say let bygones be bygones, but maybe move past the past. It doesn't seem to make any sense, but you know what I'm talking about. Move forward into the possibilities of the future. But also very useful against any upcoming war against Alpha and the Whisperers. And I love that. Really, I think the most important line, one, I love Negan being human. While he was messing with everyone else, when Michonne was there, he was very straightforward, he was very human, he was very compassionate. Not only talking about how special Judith was and he deserves, but also Michonne, you've been through a lot, you deserve to not have to deal with anymore. Again, very... some good man inside of Negan somewhere. And that's his point with the final statement there, is when they're talking about what's going to bring, you know, they were able to pull themselves together, common enemy, common goal, versus, no, an evil force will bring good people together. Same thing, because nobody ever thinks that they are evil. Everybody believes that they are good, and they are doing the right thing. That is the great dynamic between a good and an evil character, and the gray that tends to lie in between. It's how far, what are the choices you're willing to make in pursuit of that good intention that is often the separating factor. And I think that sets up a great position between Alpha's point of view and everybody else's point of view, Michonne and company. And it, coming from Negan, a former villain who now may be a good guy, sort of makes sense. He never thought that he was evil. He thought he was making the choices that needed to be made. So, worth listening to, and I think Michonne was. Alright, a couple of small things. One, there seems to be a thread running around that RJ is a figment of Michonne's imagination. Something about him not appearing in any scenes other than Michonne. He did. When everybody left the kingdom last time, he was playing there with a little group of kids. But more specifically, tonight's episode, when they arrived at Alexandria, sorry. When they arrived at Alexandria, we saw RJ, gave a hug, playing snowballs, going after Daryl, so it wasn't just Michonne interacting, and he wasn't just imaginary in the group. He was interacting with Daryl and everybody else around him. So yes, RJ does seem to be an actual physical child, and not some, you know, Fight Club manifestation of Michonne's. Speaking of Michonne, there was I like the little sequence between, the discussion between Ezekiel and Michonne before they had left the kingdom. Or I guess was actually when they were, in the sanctuary, talking about the only reason that Alpha was able to infiltrate was because they didn't know each other anymore. Michonne thought being separated was going to protect them, and it actually made them more vulnerable. I like that sort of discussion back and forth, the group staying together. I like the fact that the charter was still held onto, and this was something that wasn't, again, further fractioning of these communities, but kind of more bringing together. So I thought that was just a nice, powerful little sequence of unity and admitting past mistakes. Oh, and yes, of course, this is the first time that we've ever had snow on The Walking Dead. Usually everything's done during summer. We've talked about winters before, but no, we've never seen, which is why I was very excited about the establishment of walkers in the snow. But they seem to follow only the rules that the plot requires. And I guess one of the reasons why they didn't have to worry about actually encountering any whisperers, just walkers, and that was one of the curiosities I had with the big final, the fight there by the stream. Were some of these whisperers, were they whisperers in kind and the walkers were frozen and then you can tell the difference? To me, smart way to take out all the whisperers. Walkers are frozen, kill the whisperers, they're the only ones moving, right? Apparently not, and apparently the whisperers aren't even there. They are in their southern territory? I'm guessing. I thought that this was actually a time jump, the final sequence when we get to see Alpha and Beta, and they were saying the time, and Beta's saying the time away, you know, has been good for the group, even for you, and she's like, I need to be stronger, and I guess beat me like I beat my kid to make me stronger. Ew. So it felt like that might have been a time jump forward into spring, but then we got the radio call afterwards with Ezekiel talking to Judith, and that seemed to be, you know, now, or in the winter time still. So I'm guessing that that means that the Whisperers have another territory south, and that's where they went. Which I guess is smart on them. But that final scene, because we have to be stronger, I have made mistakes. It seems like she's planning for war anyway. So maybe crossing the territory is kind of a moot point. Whether they had left, again, all of these bodies behind them. It's wintertime. Go and collect them. Pull them on your side of the territory. Get rid of them. Don't leave a dying battlefield in the background. Because when Whisperers come back, they'll find them and know that you crossed their territory. Maybe that doesn't even matter if Alpha is planning war anyway. Oh, and of course, our final radio sequence there. The episode opens up, of course, with Ezekiel speaking on the radio. The episode ends again with Ezekiel speaking on the radio to Judith about getting past all of this, perhaps even going back to the kingdom, you know. This will grow, we'll be fine, we'll get through this winter. Which, again, makes it seem like the previous scene with Alpha and Beta means that they were in a southern location away from the snow. But of course, they finish speaking and then they go away and we get kind of like, it's cliche. You walk away from the radio and that's when the radio sparks to life. Some voice speaking over it. Whose voice? Couldn't really tell. Is it meant to be Maggie? Didn't really sound like her. Could it be the characters over on Fear the Walking Dead? I know we had the preview today and they're talking on the radio and reaching out. Could it be them? Could it be a whole other group? Could it be Janice that went away with Rick? I thought that they were going to do like some sneak preview of the Walking Dead movies here, but we don't know. We just got some unidentified voice, female, child, something like that, which, again, will probably play into what's going to happen next season, but don't really know where to go with that. I think there's something in the comics that it might refer to, but I think that I didn't read any more after this. Not familiar with that. Alright, so that wraps up Season 9. Which, mostly good. The opening, first part of the season, you thought it was a little stretched out, trying to deal with the whole Rick goodbye and maybe over a little done. A few middle episodes were okay. I thought, actually, we had a nice big stretch once we got introduced to the Whisperers. I think was really... We had a good number of episodes. And last week, I know I kind of harped on a little bit, but like I said, there were a lot of good elements within it, even if I felt some things were a little underwhelming. But that's personal with me. I know for a lot of people that was extremely shocking, and you should be shocked. It was a shocking moment. But I think overall, I think it was a decent season. I think it really picked up once we got through that early beginning kind of like, you know, Rick bit. I think once the Whisperers came in, like I said, a really good stretch of episodes. And even this episode, while I had some issues, I think there was a lot of good content going forward. I just think it really should have been the beginning of next episode. next season. Really, again, it totally felt like this. Feels odd taking a break right now. Are we going to come back in winter? Are we coming back in the spring? Are we just going to see the fallout of this? Or we got to sort of let things know what's going to... Again, this felt like a new beginning. So, I don't really know. But we got to see snow and walkers, so that was something. It was new. Anyway, that is going to wrap things up for now. Thank you so much for joining me with all of these reviews this entire season. And remember, since winter has come, it's a perfect transition to Game of Thrones, which starts in 2 weeks. The final season. Walkers coming down, and they can move in the snow because they're magical. That's magic that justifies it. Here, no. You freeze in the snow. Game of Thrones, you can walk in the snow. Magic changes all the rules. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to that. Should be very exciting. So that is in 2 weeks. And of course, we're still in the midst of American Gods. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. returns May 10th. Super excited about that. Anyway, please come join all those reviews. Throw some comments down in the section. Let me know what you guys think about this episode, this season, the Snow Walkers. Give me your thoughts. What are all of you thinking? Comment section right below. You can do that. Hit the like button. Did I already say that? Subscribe. That's this button right here. Don't miss the final season of Game of Thrones here, plus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything else. And in fact, there's a couple other reviews randomized that you can check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.